Question: does believing in God require just faith? In the previous presentation, I have put together a number of arguments for the existence of God, or proving the existence of God. And when it comes down to it, listening to all the evidences that was presented, isn't then believing in God really is just a matter of faith? You could almost say, don't all religious questions belong to the realm of just faith? Well, that is true. Faith is a vital ingredient in believing that God exists. But yet, in today's society, in today's definition of what faith is, unfortunately, it tends to lean towards blind. Unfortunately, it tends to suggest that faith is about throwing your mind away. It's about not basing on reason. There is no logic. It's not based on facts. It's not based on evidence. Faith, in today's suggestion of definition, seems to suggest that faith is blind. But that is not what the biblical definition of faith is about. Let's explore this. The Bible says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." This is a mouthful, I know. The word's being used, assurance, and the other word that's being used is conviction. And these two words essentially suggest there is knowledge and there is evidence, in fact, based on evidence and facts of things hoped for or not seen. So in essence, what it means is that you have faith, and the faith is based on an evidence, or faith is an evidence-based understanding. Well, a clear evidence is the miracles that was performed by Jesus. In John chapter 20, verse 31, it says, and I quote, "These signs are written down," or these signs are being shown, "so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah." So there are evidences that prove, biblically, that proves that God is real. Well, if we took it and bring it into today's understanding, we all have to live with faith, regardless of who we are. We all have faith. A simple example in today's environment would be every time you get onto a plane to fly somewhere else, you exercise faith. You exercise evidence-based faith. You are getting into a steel cage flown by somebody called a pilot whom you don't even know, never met this person, don't even know the name of this person, and don't even know whether this person was qualified. You don't even know whether the person was male or female. You simply get onto the plane, and with faith that you are going to arrive at your destination safely. Now, this faith is not blind. You know the brand or the airline company, and you know the government has a certain process and certain procedures to ensure the safety of a particular aeroplane or a particular company. You have evidence that it is safe to go into an aeroplane or an accredited with an accredited company and fly to your destination. That is faith. Biblically, we know in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament, there were ample and very, very convincing evidences given by the prophets, given by Jesus, and given by the apostles as well, that they are the messengers of God and that God exists because God performed miracles that are witnessed by not just believers but non-believers as well as hostile witnesses. There were ample evidences of miracles that's performed in the New Testament and miracles that are performed in the Old Testament. But in today's environment, we will be hard-pressed to see the parting of the Red Sea, for instance. Evidences provided by God in today isn't as pronounced and as dramatic as it was described in the Old and the New Testament. Most times we think that God has been hidden away from us. Where is God in today's society? And despite the so-called lack of evidence, we are asked to continue to believe in the God of the Bible anyway. Even though in today's society there isn't as pronounced or as dramatic evidences that happened during biblical times, yet it does not mean that our faith is any less evidence-based than biblical times. It does not mean that we can't be assured or have any deep conviction about God based on so-called lack of evidence, because in today's society there are still evidences that God exists and that God is a personal God and He's here to have a relationship with us. If you look at the other presentations that I've put forth in the presentation about does God exist, it gives very clear, very, very clear indication that God does exist, especially today. It does give evidences that God exists. In those presentation, I provided 4 very logical and reasonable arguments that God exists. I covered the cosmological argument, I covered the design argument, I covered the moral argument, and I covered the personal argument, all giving very clear indication and evidences that God still exists. Despite what skeptics would say, there is no evidence for God in today's environment. So, in conclusion, what I'm saying is faith and evidence work together. It's not just blind faith when we are talking about the notion of Christianity. Well, let's just explore even a very personal example. Let's look at a relationship, meaning a human relationship, perhaps a husband and wife. When I dated my wife, I gathered evidence about her, that where she lives, what she does, her character. I observed her, and I'm sure she observed me at the same time. I met her parents, and my wife met my family, and I met the brothers and sisters and all her siblings, and vice versa. As we date our spouse, we started to gather evidences about that person. So then we would say, based on a certain period, we would say, yeah, we need to make a decision based on those evidence that we have collected. But remember, we will not have all the evidences to make that decision. We will never have all the evidences to make the decision. But we had enough evidence or sufficient evidence to make the decision to marry my wife. If I didn't, if I had to wait for all the information, it would be too late. We perhaps will be so old by the time we collect any or all the information, will be too late to get married. We probably will be dead by then. And the whole fact that we probably will not get all the information to make that decision. So the decision to marry a person, in my instance, the decision to marry my wife, was based on sufficient evidences. And then it was based on faith. The faith that she is the person that I imagine her to be. I married her and she married me, obviously based on a certain degree of faith, but that faith was not blind faith. It was based on evidence that was collected. So in summary, the Bible did say in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 6, it says, "It is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists in the first place, and that he rewards those who are sincerely seeking him or seek him." So faith is very important, but it's not blind faith. God, in a sense, does not want to blindly believe in him. He wants to reason with us. He wants to use our brains and our minds to understand him, and based on those evidences, we then believe in him. So, faith, in biblical terms, is never blind, it is evidence-based.